Hi, this is Nick from Elite Outdoor Fitness. This video blog is about tapering and how to taper. So obviously the tapering period depends on the event. So let's talk about like half marathons and upwards, something that's going to be really taxing. And also taking into consideration the amount of training that you've been doing as well will determine whether you're going to be doing like a 1 week taper, 2 week taper or 3 week taper. So let's say, for example, you're doing something over 12 miles. It's quite arduous. It might be with weight or not with weight. It's always a good idea to taper. And most people don't taper down at all. They either go straight into a 1 week deload and they're not even deloading as much, and then they're racing, and then they're wondering why all their training hasn't worked because they're finding it so taxing. You can have the perfect training program, and when on race day, if you don't get your deload correctly or your taper correctly, then you're going to be feeling fatigued. Trying to establish yourself whether you've had a good enough taper is actually really difficult to do because you've generated so much fitness and you're going to feel really strong. And the only time that you're going to really your body's going to show you that you haven't recovered enough is when you start to load at the end of where you're meant to be kind of starting to feel tired anyway. But that will just come on a little bit earlier and you probably won't recognize it. But rule of thumb is that most people do not taper and do not deload as much as they should do. So in what form should it take? I normally taper because we're doing stuff that's over 10, 12 miles and upwards, and certainly with weight, and I've normally had a really kind of arduous training, progressive training program with the RTGs or as in the PT, depending who we're training, or whether it's part of our RTG process. We've normally had quite an arduous build-up, and so I taper myself for a 3 week period. And the form that takes is normally a staging down of loading. Overall loading, that's distance, that's load, that's intensity, the minutes you spend it at different types of intensity, over 82 up to say 95%. So we reach our loaded week, our full loaded week, and in between that as well we've had obviously deload weeks to kind of reset ourselves and move into the next phase of training, right up until we get to our fully loadest week. And then a reduction of that over 3 weeks and then racing. And that form might take, for example, week 1 reducing from 100% down to about 75%. Week 2, down to about 55%, maybe 60. And then week 3, down to about the magic number of about 35 to 40%, which has been proven to be really effective in the amount of loading that you need to go down to ensure full recovery, okay? Recovery is really important, obviously, when you're racing, but it's really important to recover just enough so that you don't lose your fitness gains. That's done in essence by reducing your loading from the distance that you run or your training, the loading that you're putting on within that training. And that includes VO2 max, lactate threshold work, everything that's intense, that's working above 82% of your maximum heart rate, for example. And although the loading comes down from distance and the loading overall that comes with that distance, it's really important to make sure that you still capture lactate threshold and VO2 max all the way up to T-minus 3 or 4 days. Okay, it's been proven that a reduction in mileage and that loading is really, really important, down to about 35%. But you must hold on to lactate threshold and VO2 max sessions, but they are just less intense and they're less in duration. You're spending less minutes each week within that period. So you might be spending 30 or 40 minutes, for example, between 85 and 88% and upwards during your most loaded week, and you have to have a reduction of that by, let's say, 20%, then about 45%, and then about 65, 70%, okay? But they still must be active in your training during that time. And therefore, the last week is reduced down to about 45. And each of those weeks as well should include more flexibility, more mobility, foam rolling, stretching, and deep tissue massage as well if you've got time and money to do that as well. Thanks for listening. I hope this helps.